We're now going to take a look at our async tasks doInBackground and onPostExecute methods. doInBackground is where we'll read the WeatherBug web service data that's coming to us in JSON format, and onPostExecute is where we will take that data and pass it off to the listener so that the listener, the forecast listener, can go ahead and display that data. Now, just as we did in the ReadForecastTask class, the way creating a URL that contains the specific web service method that we want to invoke, any arguments we need to pass to that method, and our WeatherBug API key. So once again, here is a location where you will need to insert your own API key in order for the web service to actually return data to you. Now, part of the URL consists of a string that we are loading up from our strings.xml file, pre-zip code URL. So if I go ahead and pull that up here, you can see the pre-zip code URL string, and if I scroll to the right a bit here, you can see the beginning part of our get hourly forecast web service call for the WeatherBug web services. So I take that and we concatenate that with the string zip code string, which represents the location for which we'd like to load some data. And then we have a bunch of options preceding the API key that are separated by ampersands. Each key value pair of data that you're sending to a web service in a REST web service call is separated from the next by an ampersand. And then you have the name of the key, an equal sign, and the name of the value, or the actual value, excuse me, that's going to be passed. Now, HT is the WeatherBug web services indication of a parameter that's being passed to the web service call, and then the values that we'd like to get back, these are actually encodings for things like the temperature. T stands for temperature, I stands for image, CP stands for chance of participation, FL stands for feels like, and H stands for, I forget, so we'll go over here and I'll show you in the documentation that H stands for humidity. And this is the actual web page for the JSON web APIs of the WeatherBug web services. By the way, if you go to the top of this page, you can see that it tells you that you must have your own API key, which you can register for once again at developer.weatherbug.com. So going back down in the documentation here to the hourly forecast, this is where we discovered the format for making the web API call that gives us back hourly forecast data. And again, HT is the hourly data types. What data do you want to get back in the results? And you can see there are a bunch of other values we can get besides the 5 that we happen to be asking for in this case. So we could give an even more detailed weather description if we were to request these other pieces of information. So here is the web service call, and if let's refresh this actually, since this is from yesterday. And so here's today's current forecast hourly list, as they call it. By the way, in the documentation, if you scroll down a little bit further, they give you a sense of what this returns. And as you can see, what we're getting is a JavaScript object that consists of the key forecast hourly list and its value, which is an array of JavaScript objects that contain hourly weather data. So going back over here, you can see that our array starts with an object that has a chance of precipitation of 0. Date time is a timestamp indicating which time this is for. A description of the weather is clear. A dew point, feels like label, and a bunch of other pieces of information that are being passed to us in this case. Now, as we go back over here to our doInBackground method, the URL that we just created, we must open a stream to that URL to get a byte-based input stream that allows us to read data from the web service. We pass that to a new input stream reader, which now is able to interpret those bytes as character-based information, and we assign that to the reader variable forecast reader. Input stream reader, again, is a subclass of reader. Then at line 73 we create a JSON reader which knows how to read JSON objects from a reader, and in our case the reader is the input stream reader that's attached to the stream from our web service URL. And as we did in the read location task class, we know that we're getting back a JSON object, so the first thing we do on our JSON reader is call its begin object method, which allows us to start reading the first object from the stream. Now within that we then call next name, which gets us the name of the next attribute available to us, which is also in this case the first attribute available to us in this JSON formatted data. And as long as the name that we get back is equal to the name represented by the hourly forecast string in our strings.xml file, and that string is hard-coded to be forecast hourly list, as long as that's true, we will then read the forecast using that forecast JSON reader. And we'll take a look at the ReadForecast method in a separate video shortly, but basically what this is going to do is it's going to go into the results, and let me pull those back up on the screen for a moment here, and it's going to grab data from the very first object in the array. And then finally, when we're done reading that first object, we will close the JSON reader and we will be done with our background task. Now once the background task is completed, then onPostExecute will be called, and as you can see, all we're doing in onPostExecute is notifying our weather forecast listener by calling its onForecastLoaded method, which will then cause us to display all of this information on the screen.